we'll go ahead and get started for everybody. I know I still see a few people coming in, but so I'll do some quick introductions. My name's Corey Bell. I'm the janitor here at BuildingPoint Mid-America. And Kevin?
Yeah, I am Kevin Kaufman. I'm the hardware sales manager here for BuildingPoint Mid-America, coming to you live from Central Kentucky in a bunker, avoiding all the virus out there.
And yet somehow he still has cell coverage. So I don't have cell in my bunker, so I got to figure that one out. So quick course outline. Today is all about, we kind of called it 101 data creation. So we're going to talk a little bit about data creation of data that was created from other authoring pieces and bringing those in. So we're going to do a live demonstration of loading and managing multiple drawings. We're also going to, again, show Trimble Connect for being able to manage that. We're going to also do point file creation from the tablet. So showing the layout user how to create data and how to add data, how to add offsets, and many different things like that, as well as a little bit of how to collect data in the field. So if there was a condition that you encountered that maybe wasn't shown on your model or wasn't shown on your set of drawings, it's a way that you can record that and push that back to the field and also start to draw that and create kind of an isometric of what you saw. And then we'll go over some tips and tricks and then Q&A. And as well, we will talk about our upcoming webinar, which I'll hit one more time. In 2 weeks, the 29th, we're going to cover in depth, a much deeper dive into models. And that's working with models, not dating models, but rather working with models. So how to import models, how to export models, and we're going to go through a couple other tips and tricks as well. So I'm going to go over opening a project. We're going to talk about opening it via Trimble Connect, and I'm going to show you that live. And then we've also got creating a new project, and just to kind of break that down for creating a new project, and I will do this live, but I like to talk through it as well. You can create data and you can import data via a CSV or a TFL. If you have old software, there are other exporting ways that you can update those to get the proper file type as well. So if you use the old MEP software, there's a file converter for that. And it also comes on your tablets as well. But we're going to show you how to import the CSV or the TFL. And then the other one is importing drawings. And kind of Kevin and I are old school at this. You used to have to do points first and then do drawings afterwards. And that's kind of the way it's been ingrained in us. Today, you can open the drawing first and then open the points after that. Kevin and I are still just stuck in our ways, I guess, on that one. I think a lot of folks are. But as far as drawing imports, just to kind of point out, within Trimble Field Link, you can open a DWG or a DXF or an IFC, an SKP, or a PDF. The one common question that we get a lot is, can I open a Revit file? Well, a native Revit file, no, you cannot open that. However, from Revit, you can do an export as a DWG in 2D or 3D, or a IFC. If you're really old school, you can use a DXF. I've not seen one of those in about 5 years, thankfully. But those are all file types that we'll dive into a lot deeper in a couple of weeks. But just know those are the 5 drawing file types that you can have opened into Trimble Field Link. And the last thing I want to point out while I'm talking about drawings, when we talk about some drawing files, you'll see some drawings in Trimble Field Link that'll be titled TRB. That's a Trimble file. That's Trimble takes it and converts it to our viewing engine, and so that's why it calls it a TRB. But that is just your drawing file, and I'll show you how the icons identify what those are. And then outside of that, just menu commands, so how to get to these. So how to open a project or how to import a project, it's as simple as to open or create a new project. You go from the More menu up in the upper right to Jobs, and then from Jobs, you go to Manage and open that. If you're going to be importing drawings, in lieu of hitting Manage, you hit Import, and you load the new data sets at that point in time, whether it be the points file first and then the drawing after that. Okay, so bear with me. I'm going to step a little bit off screen here and start doing live. So now what I'm doing is I'm starting to work in Trimble Connect. And what I'm working through is opening the file, opening a set of drawings. And what I'm doing now, though, is I'm on my computer actually going direct to Trimble Connect. So in Trimble Connect, I just want you to be able to see the files that are there. So what I've got here is I've got my drawings, I've got my data, I've got everything there as kind of my native data set. So this is not from the tablet, but rather going from a web browser and going into my Trimble Connect to view what I've got. So as I jump through this just a little bit here, so I'm kind of walking through everything. Now I'm on the tablet, and as I go on the tablet and I go to open everything, you're going to see that I'm going to go to manage. And I apologize, there's a little bit of a lag here. So as I go to manage, and I'm going to walk you through this, I'm going to go to going to manage, and then I went to Trimble Connect. So I opening Trimble Connect, I do my sign in, I've got everything set up there. So now that was under settings. So now I'm going back to manage, and I'm going to open this file. So as you can see now, I've got the cloud icon highlighted in blue off to the left. Now I've got that in yellow showing you that that's what I'm looking in. So inside of that, I'm going to search through that area and find the file that I'm looking for, which right now I'm going to open this embassy project. So on this embassy project, give it just a minute to load up. So again, what I want to show here is I'm opening a file that already exists. So when this opens, it's going to have the drawing file and all the points loaded in. It's a little bit blurry and grainy, I apologize. But as you can see, one click, I opened that project and it loaded the drawing and it loaded all my points together, all within one heartfelt swoop. So now I'm going to show you another process of using that same file, except I'm going to modify it just a little bit. And I'm going to show you if I was to go through and open the drawing, or I'm sorry, open the points file and then open the drawing after that. So right now I'm going to show you as I'm navigating through. So again, here I'm going to go up to more. So up in the upper right menu, I go to more. And what I like to do first every time I do this is I go to more and then map every time I open my tablet. And all I do is verify that nothing was open. There was a little bit of a lag there. So you didn't get to see that step. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to the project itself. Okay, so I went to the project, I created one, I went to import. So now from the import, as I search through my files, I'm going to go back to the embassy folder. And when I get here, I want you to see in embassy, I go to the next folder up, and in that I've got a TFL file up at the top, a TRB, and a CSV. And if you look at the icons, the TFL and the CSV are data because it looks like a spreadsheet, and the TRB is a drawing. So first I'm going to open the TFL, and that's going to load in points only. So as that loads in, I'm going to give it just a chance here, and it tells me it loaded 255 points for that project. So now I'm going to go back to import, and I'm going to import the TRB, so it loads the drawing for me. So now what it's telling me in the green box at the bottom, which are called toaster pop-ups, is that it's loaded that up. I go to the map, and I view that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on one specific point so you can see here. So on that point under the 314 number, it's actually, I think, point number 458. So just showing you that I can get right to that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to that project that I opened previously on Connect and show you if I just go from the tablet to manage, and then I click right on that job, it opens the exact same project that we were looking at, but it was a one-click open. So in lieu of having to import this and then import that, it's a one-click open for me. So it's just expediting my ability to open that file a lot quicker and just make it a little bit faster. But as you can see on there, that same point, 485. And on this file, for those that haven't noticed yet, on this file, I'm using Northings Eastings. So not XYZ, but rather NEZ file points. And Kevin will cover that here again in just a little bit.
All right. And so, guys, now I'll go through a little bit more about the creating data, which is what we really want to talk about today anyway, a little more detail. Please don't hesitate to reach out individually to your respective sales rep. As we get to the end of this thing, we're going to show you who that is. Also, Sean Thompson is our support guy locally, knows everything there is. He's our trainer, and he knows VDC manager. He knows everything there is about this Trimble Field Link software. But if there's anything we leave unanswered on this, please feel free to reach out. But as we get into creating data, we're going to talk about probably the most popular way to create that data is using the model by using endpoints, midpoints, intersections, and circle arc centers, which are, if you're used to at all, if you've seen AutoCAD, it's kind of like click points. We can put a check mark in those different options and then go through and select those entities within our model to be able to create that data. We can also create the data manually, as it shows here, either by going in and manually entering those data points in our input form by dialing in the data that we know that we've gotten maybe from a surveyor or whoever, so we can create those points that way. We can do the line work, obviously the arcs and circles. We can do the offsets, manage and control, and also creating center of a wall. Now, the thing I will stress about this is that as you're bringing that data in, it's probably going to be coming from your surveyor or whoever, okay? So as we're getting into this, you can see the tabs up there: create, measure, device, and more. And so we're just going to start by talking about going into the create tab. We've already got a model. This is a different model than Corey was using, but that's okay. We can see all the different functions within here for creating that data. And so we're going to start off just at the top there by going into the plan mode. And this allows us either with no model at all or with coming in on top of a model and creating data off of known points that are already in there. And so the first thing I do is I bump into my input form. The notepad down there at the bottom that you see is gold. And I'm going to go in and say my distance is 10 foot. And I'm going to select an angle here. If I wanted to, I could go in and dial in a specific angle that I know of. I can also bounce around the input form and enter other entities or different things in here as I need to. And so I'm going to leave my angle at 0. It's where it's going to default to. I can go in and, again, I've got my naming conventions, so I can come in and be very specific with my naming conventions. And we've talked before about our layer control. I want you to notice the top of that, we have underscore route. I really highly recommend putting an underscore in front of your layer controls and your layer names. But we bounce over to the drawing. I select the point that I want to start with my plan work, and I can see that the first thing it does is it projects what's in the input form. And I can rotate on the left there. You see my predetermined clicks over there. I can rotate my different angles by hitting those buttons 45 degrees here and there. And I'm also showing what's in the input form, that I've got a preset angle in there right now of 180 degrees, my offset distance of 10 foot, my elevation is 0. And so as we're looking at that, I'm seeing again what it's projecting even before I create that data. So it's important for us to pay attention and see what we're doing, make sure that's what we want. You can see too that I can click my presets over there. I can bounce between 90, 45, and 30 degrees on those presets, or I can go in and create a custom angle by bouncing back into the input form and going down to, let's go to the angle here. And we're going to set that at 22 degrees. You can see down the center of the screen. And now all of a sudden we're 22 degrees off of top center. And so I can go in at that point and I can start creating data if I want to, just by hitting the create tab. Or I can go back and I can just dial it in at 90. It's going to pop straight over on the right now at 90 degrees off of top dead center. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and create that. Now we see we've got a line box down there that's got a check mark in it. If I turn that off, I can hit the create tab, and now I'm going to create data without having a connected line to it. And so now I'm creating floating points out on my drawing out here. I can still rotate and create those points as I need to, just by going down there, hitting the create tab. And I can continue. If I'm doing a run of hangers or something, as quick as I can hit the create button, that data is going to be created. We also have the ability to do the undo if we needed to. After a few clicks, we decide that's not the one I wanted. We hit undo, and it immediately retracts that point. And so get in here. And when we do the undo, one thing that we need to remember is if we get out and go back into the plan mode to try to create, what we're going to find is that the undo has already been turned off. As soon as you leave that mode, you're not going to be able to do undo anymore. But we can go back into line work though. Having created data, we go back into line work and we can just create some simple line work off of that. So if we've imported a CSV that is nothing but raw data points, for instance, and there's not a model, you just see a shotgun scatter of points in there. Just as I've done here, you just select, just like when you were a kid and you were playing connect the dots. We're going to select some points, and you can see that I've got the line icon highlighted on the bottom left, and I can just draw all the way around those points wherever I need those points, and I can hit my create, and every time I do, I'm going to create a line. I can also do an undo command on that and pull that back off. Really good for highlighting wall lines and things like that, forms, whatever you need to do, right? Again, just create the tab there, hit the create tab, and you can see that we're going to create that line work, okay? We also have the ability, so it wants to know what points you're working with when we're creating that line work. We have that same ability to create an arc. So I've got my 2 points selected that I want to use as my subject points, and I want to go into my radius there in my input form and say it's going to be a certain specific radius that I'm going to be working with. And by doing that, I can dial it in. If I know that radius, I can dial it in and I can say it's a 40 or a 50-foot radius, whatever I need to designate that as being, if I know what it is, right? I can also go in and segment those lines. If I select the line, I can go in and tell it how many segments I want to be on that line, or I can tell it what the specific measurement of those spaces that they should be, okay? So I'm going to say segment length should be 3 foot and 6 inches. I go back over to my input form and I can see now it's spaced out at 3 foot 6 inches. I got a start on one end. I can rotate that and hit my little alternate button down there, my toggle, and it'll create the start at the other end. So, so you'll see how that's demonstrated there. I can hit my deselect button. I like to stress the deselect button. That makes sure that there's no points highlighted. Bottom left corner. I also call that the Ghostbuster button. So bottom left corner, that's our deselect button. We want to be cognizant of that and make sure that we're turning that off when we don't need any points highlighted. We want to make sure we're turning those off. All right, but then we're going to go into the point manager mode. If we go to create and go down to point manager, we're going to open up this screen. And we can start by seeing that we've got our point highlighted in the bottom left corner. By doing that, we can go in, we can manually enter points. We can also manually enter different attributes for those points. Once we've got that input, we can hit the I button and we can see the information button over the bottom right there. We can see that all that information has come into the point that we've created, okay? We've got its color is red, its size is 1/2 inch, right? So with the attribute name and the attribute value. We can also go in, if we needed to move that point a little bit, we can dial in on the XY, which again is just a format that we're using for our data. And we can move that point wherever we need to, okay? We can manually enter a point if we've got all that information, or we can move it a little bit. We can also make that point a control point just by simply putting a check mark in the control point box. And again, the naming conventions, the layers, all those things, the descriptions, all still apply here. So just make sure that we're doing whatever our company is wanting us to do and whatever our standards are for creating the data, okay? And there you go. And so now what we're seeing is that if we go back over and we hit our input form, and we can see again, we're going to apply all the edits. We're going to make that a control point now by putting the check mark in the box. And you can see the symbol has changed for that point that we've been working with. It now shows as the symbology shows that it's a control point. But we can also go back into the input form and switch that right back out and make that just a standard data point that we're going to be laying out just by going into the input form and turning that box back off and then applying those same edits again. So we've got the ability to do that all through here. That's the big thing about Point Manager. You can go in and edit points. You can manually create points. You can delete those points, whatever it is you need to do on the fly just by going into your Point Manager and going down and making sure that the icon on the bottom left, the gold one is highlighted right now, is in fact still highlighted. That's for managing individual points. There we go. We're going to go in and we change that back to a regular layout point. And all we got to do is hit Apply Edits. And then we're golden again. You can see that the symbol has changed. Now we're going to go over to the offset mode. So in offset mode, again, it's going to do the offsets based on the points that you select. So you need to define what line that you want to use for your points, okay? And once you define that, we can go into the input form again, and we can say, hey, we need a 2-foot offset, whatever that offset needs to be. We might make it a 4-foot offset, and then we define what we want the intervals to be and what we want the start distance to be. So then we can see that it's projecting out what those offsets are going to be. We're going to start 5 feet from the start, and then we're going to proceed with our offsets down that line at the interval that we told it we want to be, which is 4 feet, okay? 2 feet offsets. I can decide, do I want it on both sides of the line, or do I want it on the left side of the line, or do I want it on the right side of the line, depending on what my start button scenario is, okay? The start is just simply going to say, hey, I want to start from the opposite end, so that when I start my 5 foot, it'll start from the other side instead of the end I'm on right now, okay? Or I also have the option to go to single mode. I can just simply select, hey, I just want one offset. And that just manages and helps us to keep all that extra data from being created in our model when we don't really need it. I hate to have a drawing that's got all this data on there that's unnecessary data. It just confuses the issues I'm working with it, okay? But along those lines, we can also go in and do a similar function with the arc. So again, I select my 2 subject points that I'm interested in. Once I select those, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to project what I've already got in my input form. I want my offset to be 0 because I want the points to be created on my arc. So I can walk around and actually lay those points out that are on the arc. So, but I do want them 5 feet apart. I can go down to 6 inches apart, whatever I need, and basically drag that tip of that prism rod all the way around and create that arc if I need to. I can do the large side of the arc, the small side of the arc, or I can flip and go to the other side. If I'm on the wrong side, maybe I need to flip my arc and go to the other side just by using the toggle switch down in the center of the screen there. Again, we've got a start and an end on this, so I can toggle between those as well with the toggle button on the bottom left center there. All right. But then I can create a point between 2 wall lines, and that's the last tool here. I really like this one. If you need to just find a center point between 2 wall lines, you're going to select the 2 subject lines. As soon as you do, you just walk along that line wherever you think you might like to create that point and click, and it's going to find the center of that wall line, okay? But if you don't want to, remember, you can do the deselect and you can deselect that point and it'll disappear for you. But we also have the ability when we're in point mode to create a point anywhere. That's the little gold hand you see there. All right, so I can go onto my model anywhere and just select and say create. As soon as I do, it's going to create that point. I would caution you though that we want to turn that little hand, that little create point anywhere button, touch it and turn it off when you're not using it. Just so if you're dragging, that you don't have an arbitrary point that you kind of put on the screen somewhere. So just be aware of that and just make sure that you turn that off when you're finished with it, and you're going to be good to go. So we've added that point. So now what we need to do is we need to be aware as well that we can go in and highlight points and deselect those or whatever we need to do, but we can discard those points. So all we're going to do is highlight those points and hit the garbage can over to the right. We just want to make sure that when we're hitting that delete button, we know exactly how many points we're deleting. We can zoom in and not realize that we've got points highlighted outside of our field of view. Consequently, we're going to delete those points. All right, so just pay attention. Remember, if we want to deselect those points, we can say, hit that deselect button. It's going to say, you want to clear all points? We're not deleting those points. We're just clearing them so they're no longer highlighted, okay? But we can go in, again, we can manage all these different points. If I want to go in and highlight a bunch of points and change the elevation, I can window around those, go into my Z area right there on my input form and change the elevation of all those points in mass. I can do that by using the eyeball button, which selects everything in the field of view, or I can use the window button by dragging around it. I can also go over and I can change the description, or I can change my layer, right? I can create another layer on the fly and put all those points at a different elevation on a new layer just by going into that input form. A lot of power in the input form. If you're not using it, you need to use it to manage your data, okay? Then we bump down to model. This is probably more than likely where you're going to create most of your data for probably most of the people on this call, because you are using a model, okay? A model that you've already imported. So we've got the click points that we talked about, midpoints, intersections, and endpoints in the circle or arc centers. I like to stress, though, that I think it's a good thing to keep only one selected at a time, okay, so that there's not too many things trying to be created at one point in time. So when I go to endpoints, you can see here on the end of these column lines, I've just selected right where the endpoint of that line is, and it found it, and it said, okay, there's the endpoint, and so it's created that point. Now the midpoint, I just selected a line, and it's going to automatically find the midpoint of that segment, okay? Depending on how it was created in Revit, AutoCAD, or your creation software, you need to pay attention to the midpoints because it may not be where you think it's going to end up, okay? But so far, it's already projected where it's going to find those points. And I said endpoints. You can see also there's a lot of points that it found in the number 9 up here. You might try to clean your drawing up and avoid some of those things from showing up. If I hit the eyeball button, it's going to find a lot of points on numbers a lot of times and things you don't intend for it to do. So I just say, yeah, I don't want to do that. So I select those and turn those back off just by clicking on them. I can deselect them. I can also obviously find intersections on the fly just by putting a check mark in the intersections and walking around my grid pattern and finding those intersections and going into my input form, making sure again that I've got my naming conventions the way I want them before I hit the create button. It's showing me down there under the create button, I'm getting ready to create 11 points. Okay, we're all good. So I hit the create tab. Now we go back up to create and go back down to grid. The first thing it does is it pops in whatever's in my input form already, okay? So if I select my input form, I can go in there and I can tell it, for instance, maybe I've got an array out in my parking lot where I'm going to be putting lighting in, okay? And so I can go in there, I can say exactly where I want to start by selecting my X and Y location. I could also go in and manually select pre-created data that's in my model and say, hey, I'm going to start right here on this point. I select it, that will populate my X and Y location. But by entering my column width and my column distance and my rows and my height, you can see that it's already projecting what I'm going to have in my model just by going back over and turning that form off, okay? But I've got columns are 8, rows are 9, my width is 10 foot, and my height is 8 feet, okay? I can also go in and I can name this what I want to so that I can preload this. I can create all these on the front end before I ever get out to the job if I want to. I can put a description in if I need to. And again, I can always go in and I can create an underscore grid layer if I want to by going in and naming the grid. I can always name those on the fly, or I can drop it into a pre-existing grid. By hitting create, you can see there's all the data. I've got all the data dropped in, and we're good to go with all of our grid now. So, but I don't like it. Remember, we've got the undo button. I can undo all that because maybe something was wrong. I didn't like it. I don't want to create all this extra data if I don't need to right now, whatever the case may be. Okay. So grid, a lot of times people get intimidated by grid. Again, hit us up. We're going to walk you through it. If we need to go through this a little bit slower, we're going to explain that to you. All right. So we really want to work with you guys and make sure you understand how to use the software. We can also go back up and we can drop down from create. We can drop all the way down to, so we always want to make sure too, we pay attention to what we've got turned on in our layer controls so that we can manage what we're seeing on the screen. It makes it a lot easier to manage creating data if you don't have 458 different layers on with all that different data on. So just think about your layer control. I like to stress that all the time when we're doing training, okay? But inside of, once we get into the create mode, we can also go down and create from a pattern, okay? Which I'm not sure if seems like we're having a little data glitch there. There we go. Create from pattern mode. When we get into create a pattern, all it's going to do is it's going to show us pre-existing grid coordinates in there, and we can go in. These are all based on 1 foot spacing, but I can go into my input form and enter these that have 6 inches or whatever I need to do for my for instance anchor bolts. Okay, and as soon as I like it, I hit add points. When I do, it's going to create that pattern for me. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is over on the far right, we're going to hit save pattern. When we hit save pattern, we want to name it. We're going to name this pattern 3. That's a default. That's okay. We're just going to name it pattern 3. Again, these are all patterns you can create before you ever even get to the job. You can load all these patterns in, all right, and create all these patterns. But now we're going to go back over and we're going to turn on all of our layers so I can see where I actually want to place this pattern, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, zoom into where I want to place this pattern, and I need to load a pattern. So by loading the pattern, I'm going to go in, I'm going to select my pattern, hit the select pattern button, and it's going to go out into my folder where I stored all the patterns, and I'm going to select the right pattern that I want to see, and it's going to tell me, okay, you loaded the pattern successfully. We can get rid of that pop-up. Then I'm going to go in and select where I want to place that pattern. You can see now I select that point. It automatically overlays on top of that footer right there or that column. When it does, I can see the 6 points. I hit the create tab, and there we go. Now, guys, remember, as we're doing this creation right here, I can actually rotate this pattern by using the tools at the bottom center of the screen. I've got 45 degrees there. I can use presets again, and that thing will pop on around for me, okay? Or I can do left, or I can do right as I need to, and I can also customly put in an angle in there. If I know it's 18 degrees, 42 seconds, 14 minutes, 15 seconds, I can dial that into my input form, and then it'll pop that pattern to that angle for me just by going straight into the input form and dialing it in specifically. All righty then. I think that takes us through most of the create tab there. We get back out and we can see that we got our model created there. So the thing I wanted to hit on though was just remembering that NEZ compared to XYZ. You hear both referred to, and one is more of a survey format and one is a building construction format. So, or AutoCAD, Revit, whatever your authoring software is, that format that it's been created in. Not a big significant difference there, except to say that, as you can see on this slide right here, we're demonstrating that NEZ, we've got an N there of 2600 for instance, and how that corresponds to XYZ. If you'll notice the Y value there, you've got 2600. So N corresponds to Y, and E consequently corresponds to X. The Z doesn't change, but that's all we're showing in this slide is how N and NEZ corresponds to X, Y, Z. Just be cognizant, be aware of what coordinate you're working in, and we're going to be able to change that by going to more, going down to jobs, and go to settings, where we can also adjust our distance unit. But you see coordinate order right there. If we hit that little up arrow right there, we're going to be able to change that over to X, Y, Z, or select the coordinate order that we want to work in. Okay?
Very good, Kevin. I'll take over before you start singing and dancing, because I'm quite certain nobody from this group wants to see that. I don't know. I think Sean's in the crowd. He might. Okay, so a couple of tips and tricks, and one thing I did want to add as well, Kevin talked about the grid points. Another good use of that, and I know Sean has said it before, is if you're setting up a room, say a mechanical room or something like that, or a room that maybe the coordination is not quite done yet, and you want to shoot a grid or a pattern for your unistrut anchors, that's a great way to do that. That's a fantastic example of using a grid and spacing it across the room. So if you had a 10 by 10 room or a 10 by 20 room, create your grid of 3 foot spacing or whatever you typically like to do and shoot that in. And then that's going to give you points to go lay out all of your hangers into that deck. Maybe if on the off chance the general contractor or the concrete contractor is in a hurry to get the deck poured above you while you're still doing coordination. That's a great way around that. A couple tips and tricks, and I know Kevin kind of hit on this, is consistent naming, and then I'm adding in the word process as well. So as you saw, as Kevin was doing those, and I apologize for a couple of glitches, as Kevin did them and as I did them, one thing that is keen is consistency matters. I know we've talked about this before. I know when Sean's done presentations, he talks about that as well. You know, knowing how you do it, how you do what you do. A perfect example is how you tie your shoes. Once you get used to it, you tie your shoes every way that day or every day that way, and you don't even pay attention to the fact that you're doing it. But in the process, while you're creating points, just, you know, you saw Kevin hitting that notepad to go identify the name, the layer, everything with those points. Just consistently remember to do that. I've seen it time and time again where people, you know, I'm set up here and then I start adding points and they're not control line points, but you're calling them control line or column line points. So consistency in that and just knowing that process, and just, again, slow down so you can go fast. The next one here is ad hoc points being added in the field by the layout user. So that's what we really wanted to show you today. In a couple of weeks, we'll show layout to a model and working with models, but this is the ad hoc lines of, say you're a concrete contractor and you want to do an offset because there's an overdig in your way and you want to be able to shoot an offset and pull a tape from that offset. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is layout to a line, but those are all workarounds. So those are ad hoc points that you're creating, or as you're doing layouts, something that wasn't in the coordinated model or the federated model that's now in your way that you want to record those points, being able to record that data, which is the exact same thing as collecting data. If you were taking over a job from somebody else and you don't have a laser scanner, maybe you've only got a few things that you want to go out and shoot, go out and shoot these with the laser and create that data, and you're doing the exact same thing as what we just showed you, except now you're using the total station to set your point in lieu of you tapping wherever you want that point to be. So just a couple of quick points there. Outside of that, the selection and deselect tool, or as Kevin calls it, the Ghostbuster tool, as my kids would call it, the no tool. That's just the circle with the cross, diagonal cross through it, just making sure you understand what you're doing there. And Kevin kind of did that on a couple of videos. I don't know if you all saw it, but as he was selecting points to edit them, if you select one, the trash can would highlight for you. And it didn't tell you the number one, but that way you knew you had one selected. If you selected more than one, it tells you how many points you've got selected above the trash can. So that way you can kind of follow along with that. And then just understanding when you hit the deselect button, that's going to deselect everything that you selected, and you may have to start over. So if you're doing it manually and trying to grab a couple thousand points at a time because you want to be bald like I am when you grow up, that's what that deselect button does for you. The other one that I like to drive home, and quite honestly, this was my own frustration for a while, was the undo button. So the undo button works great in here, but you also need to understand that much like any other program, like Microsoft Word or Excel, as soon as you go out of the function you're in, the undo button disappears. So if I was in data creation and I'm creating points, and then I clicked on map to go look at something and come back, I've lost my function. So I can no longer undo the last thing that I've done. So you can manually go select it and delete it, but you can't hit the undo button. So just remember that one as well. And then the last one, and I know Sean's going to be really proud of me for saying this, is stake your layout points. So again, just pushing that data back, and that's kind of something we've been talking about for the longest time, and that doesn't mean actually driving a stake in it. That's in the process, hitting the button up in the upper right, stake points, and then when the pop-up comes to the bottom, hit yes, stake point. That just allows that data to push back and forth. I do understand that it may be a change in process for some, but if you really want as good a data out as you're getting in, that's the way you create that. So this next one is resources, and I want to hit on something here. As I've talked about, we've got our own YouTube channel with a bunch of BuildingPoint videos, and we're continuing to add videos. The only way that any of you as a user will be identified that a new video has been added is if you subscribe. So if you go out to any of our YouTube videos, I'm trying to kind of help create some things to show you how to subscribe. But if you're not a regular YouTube user, if you go out to YouTube and you find our BuildingPoint Mid-America channel, please hit that subscribe button because we are constantly uploading a bunch of videos. One of the files that Kevin was just going through, we've got a video for data creation and a bunch of other videos that are about to go live over the weekend. So a whole lot of stuff that are like anywhere from 2 to 8 minute videos that are things as simple as setting up a tripod to establishing control and all of the different things we've been talking about, but broken it down into little chunks. And that's just to make it more manageable for you to share with other folks as well. Outside of that, we talked about learn.trimble.com. Just know it's a great resource for you to go to continue to sharpen your sword for how to not only use layout tools, but there's laser scanning tools, there's augmented reality or mixed reality tools, and a bunch of videos and learning tracks out there. Great resource for you. And quite honestly, it's a bit of a career builder too, because it's just adding to your skill set. So keep that in mind. And then on top of that, our LinkedIn page for BuildingPoint, we've always got stuff going on there as well. And then here I'm going to kind of talk through who our team is. So I'm going to start from west to east. So Kevin, you're last this time. So up in Nebraska and Kansas, we've got Charlie Kim. I know Charlie's on here as well right now. But Charlie is covering Nebraska and Kansas. And then here in Missouri and Arkansas, we've got Bob Groen. And then over in the Far East, at least for us, we've got Kevin covering Kentucky and Tennessee. That is when he climbs out of his bunker, which I think is just outside of Louisville right now. But you didn't hear that from me. So the next piece I wanted to talk about there is if you're out of that territory and you've got questions and whatnot, reach out to us, call Kevin. We'll make sure we get you the right resource. We just want you to get answers to what you need, but then we'll also help find you the other additional resources you need. I'm going to jump forward ahead of the Q&A a little bit because I think our next webinar is going to be pivotal for a lot of folks, and that is working with models. So on May 29th, same time frame as today, so in 2 weeks, we're going to cover working with models for layout. So that's not creating models in Revit or how to do VDC or how to do coordination, but once a model's created, working with that model, how to import it. We're going to talk about best practices for exporting from Revit, as well as importing that model and what you can do with it once you import it. And we'll do a little bit of file creation inside of that as well. And then one other thing I did want to talk about when I talked about territories, just so everybody on this call knows as well, we do also offer in-house VDC services. So with those VDC services, if you need anything outside of those 6 states I showed you earlier, we can do that. That's services we can do anywhere. So please let us know what you might need help with. That's why I've got Kevin's contact out there. But then on top of that, in-house, our Sean Thompson can help you guys tremendously. So got a little bit of time here for Q&A. Kevin, I think we must have talked like engineers. We got through this fast.
Well, and I've got one thing I kind of wanted to talk about too. Another kind of little tip is that when they're creating data and they're using like from a model or something like that, I think it always behooves you, one, to zoom in pretty good on your point so you don't arbitrarily pick 20 little intersections instead of the one you're focused on. And then also just think about the fact that as you're going through and creating those points, let's say you get up to 10 or 12 or 15, and then you don't zoom in very far, and you select 30 more points. You're either going to go back through there and try to turn all those off, or you're going to deselect and start all over again. My point being, zoom in on your point, create it, but also create frequently. So if you get 4, 5, 6 points, go ahead and hit the create button just so that you're not having to go back and redo a lot of work. So it's something to think about, a way to manage that a little bit.
Very good. Thank you, Kevin.
Pardon me.
Yeah, you reminded me of something I was going to add into that as well. So one thing is when you're working with a drawing, and a lot of times when somebody exports to a DWG from either Autodesk, AutoCAD, or Revit, there'll be hatch patterns that are included in it. It's famous specifically for concrete, but you may have other file types that somebody left a hatch pattern on there. You saw a little bit of it as Kevin was navigating, but hatch patterns can mess that up as well because that hatch can look like a line intersect. So just keep that in mind as well. And then the last thing that I was going to hit on is when you're working with a 3D model, just know when you're looking at plan view, if you click on a corner, if there's another corner in 3D below that, you selected that whole Z axis. So just keep that in mind. When you're working with 3D model and you're using the tap to create at endpoints or intersects and things like that, and especially bolts. Bolts are famous for this. If there's a round rod going through a stair, you may pick up every elevation that hits, the top of the bolt, the washer, both sides of the washer, both sides of the nut as it cuts through the stringer, whatever it might be. If you click on it in the wrong plane, you will click that whole axis all the way through there. So just keep that in mind. Another question that popped up here was about duplicate points. If you could maybe elaborate a little bit more about duplicate points. What's your question?
I mean, one thing that I've thought about duplicate points is I think it's probably inevitable at some point you're going to have that happen. And you can always go to your point manager and just make sure that the point icon is selected in the bottom left corner. And when you touch a duplicate point, the first thing that happens is you get a list that pops up on the left side of your screen with a list of all those duplicate points. You can go through and arbitrarily touch each one of those and delete. If you get 4 or 5 of them, you only need one, you can select each one of those and delete it and just clean that up. And a little bit of cleanup involved there, but I do recommend that.
Very good. And Kevin, that was exactly what the question was about. So I'm glad you further elaborated there. So, well, if nobody else has any questions, we look forward to you all tuning in a couple of weeks as we go through working with models. And again, that's talking about building information models, not French models or any other model that you may have, maybe model airplane. But again, we appreciate everybody's time. Appreciate you guys being here. And no, we're here. So anytime you need something, please reach out to us. We're working just like you guys are.
When would that be available again, Corey? The videos and things?
The video will be uploaded by noon on Monday. So everything will be uploaded, and the link will be shared probably before noon, so Monday morning at some point in time. All right. Well, very good. Well, again, thank you guys very much. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful weekend. See you all in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thanks for attending, guys. Give us a call. Take care.